Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football, college football playoff rankings for week 13, just released. Flipping Florida State and Washington. I'm going to get up here, not necessarily make a strong argument that that's the wrong move. You just saw the Washington Huskies, who have wins against Oregon, just went on the road and beat a very good Oregon State team that was top 12 at the time. That's not necessarily what I'm hopping on to argue about. What I'm arguing about is the idea floated around on Twitter that if Florida State wins the ACC championship game, but doesn't have Jordan Travis, that they don't deserve to be in the college football playoffs. I think that idea is absolutely ludicrous. I got my Michigan hat on right here. I'm a Michigan fan. If Michigan loses to Ohio State at home, you will not see me get up here and try to argue that Michigan should get into the college football playoffs over Florida State. Want to talk about Florida State, want to talk about the situation with Jordan Travis and what this team is heading into the college football playoffs. Before we do, just want to say thank you to you guys and a shout out to the Florida State fans. You guys have consistently showed the boys a ton of love. You guys know this is one of the programs we love talking about, what Mike Norvell is building there. Very special. You guys have shown a ton of support. If you do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Dill, I'm going to give you the T-box here. Florida State getting dropped down to 5, and the idea more of them being left out of the playoffs as a whole if they go undefeated. How are we feeling about that?
Yeah, I just don't think there's any real argument for that at this point. I mean, again, they're going to have two chances to prove they're still a very, very good football team against Florida, who frankly is much better than their record shows. Their playing team's tough. Probably should have beat Missouri, or maybe at least should have beat Missouri last week. And then Louisville's really, really good. As you can see, they're the 10th ranked team, and that's probably about where they should be. So it'll just be hard. Like, if they go undefeated, they'll have beaten a lot of good teams, and they'll have beaten good teams without Jordan Travis. And that'll be very hard to then make up some argument that, well, they wouldn't have been this without Jordan Travis. We don't know that. What they played with on the field, they were certainly good enough to be there.
It should be impossible, right? I mean, you look at how the college football playoffs are going to kind of turn out. You have Georgia, if they run the table, they're undefeated. You have Michigan or Ohio State. One of them will be undefeated and be getting in. You have Washington potentially being undefeated and getting in. And then you have Florida State. And if they're undefeated and have a conference championship, there shouldn't be a one-loss team that jumps them, regardless if they have Jordan Travis or not. I mean, yeah, we haven't seen a ton of tape, but to just blindly assume that this Florida State team can't play at a high level because Jordan Travis is out. And this is not me getting up here and arguing Jordan Travis isn't a meaningful part of this Florida State Seminoles team. It's more me saying you can't just assume that this Florida State team is going to wither away without Jordan Travis. And you can't really take away from what they've already accomplished, which is a very strong resume with wins.
And that's what I think people are going to try to do, essentially. It'll be like, oh, well, if you didn't have Jordan Travis, you don't win X game on your schedule without it. And again, you're right. You can't really argue that Jordan Travis doesn't make this team a better team. He is obviously a great player. But at the end of the day, I just don't see how the college football ranking committee can essentially just try to look back and do some hypothetical fairyland of, oh, well, if they didn't have Travis, they'd lose this game. They won these games. They beat a very good LSU team. They beat a very good Clemson team. They've won every game they played. If they do that and continue to do that, again, I'm with you. They'll also have proved that they can do it without Travis.
And yeah, you said it right. They have an opportunity to go on the road and play an SEC team in the Florida Gators and win that game. And then they have the opportunity to potentially be the top 10 team in the Louisville Cardinals and show that even without Jordan Travis, this team is still one of the best teams in the country. And you look at this Florida State team and you look at the talent. Yes, Jordan Travis, an integral part in that offense. This is still an offense that averages 38.3 points per game. That is top 8 in the country. You look at the defense, only allowing 17.3 points per game. That's also top 10. Try to find me another team across the country that is top 10 in scoring offense and top 10 in scoring defense. There's not many of them out there, just kind of highlighting that Florida State is not, and again, as good as Jordan Travis was, it's not solely relying on Jordan Travis. I mean, this is a team that has Keon Coleman, who should be a top 15 pick in the NFL draft. You look on the defensive side of the ball, they got Jared Verse, probably should be a top 20 pick in the NFL draft. So, yes, Jordan Travis, an integral part in that team, but he's not the only guy on this team. And this Florida State team is still one of the best teams in the country, whether Jordan Travis is suiting up or not.
And frankly, it would honestly set a horrible precedent. And I think you can
Yes.
see some teams get absolutely hosed because, like, if you start doing injuries and start basing your judgment on them, again, if they lose one of these next two games, they're obviously not going to be in there. And then that'll, like, yeah, if you're the type of person who wants to claim they're not the best team, well, if they lose one, they lose one, and that is what it is. But you just can't use injuries and, again, these type of factors to judge this. It has to be what's on the field because that's the only thing we know. And what we know is that Florida State has a ton of really good players. Like, even with Jordan Travis last year, they were, what did they win, 8 games? Like, they brought in a lot of stars, like Keon Coleman, Jared Verse another year there, like just a ton of Benson, a difference maker. They just have a ton of talent. They're a better team this year than they were last year. And that's just an overall roster thing. That's not a Jordan Travis thing. They're just a really, really good team.
10 games for the Florida State Seminoles last year. That was the team that we were riding
That's
all at the end of the year. And you look at the kind of overall construction of this roster, like you look at the defense, and they're allowing a 46.8% completion percentage to opposing quarterbacks. That's number one in the country. I feel like there's this argument that Jordan Travis is the team, and it's just not true. Like, Jordan Travis was one of my favorite players in college football. Don't get me wrong. But the reason this Florida State team is having so much success, large part due to Jordan Travis, but also a large part due to a lot of NFL talent that's around the quarterback and on the defense. Still, I want to ask you this question. Do you think if Jordan Travis's injury had anything to do with Florida State dropping from 4 to 5?
It probably did, realistically. Again,
I don't
know.
I don't think so, because you look at Washington, and I don't even know. I think a lot of Florida State fans would say, look at what Washington's done. They have wins against Oregon. They have a road win against Oregon State. They have a win against Arizona. All teams that are in the top 16. Washington's resume is really good. And if you're a Florida State fan, I'm not getting up here and necessarily arguing for one thing or the other. I think if Florida State 4 or 5, that is what it is. But if you're Florida State, you know if you take care of business, someone's got to win that Michigan-Ohio State game. You're still going to be in the top 4. I'm just curious at if that even came up at all in the conversation of dropping Florida State to 5.
I don't totally know how it couldn't have, because I'm not sure what Florida State did. And again, Washington, a nice win over Oregon State. That
has nothing to do with Florida State doing anything. Sorry to interrupt you.
But that wasn't like Washington going out there and beating the wheels off Oregon State. And Oregon State's a good team, but that was a good win. I don't know what Florida State would have necessarily done to get demoted. I don't know that Washington jumped up that much higher in 1 week. If you're judging like on the play on the field, if you had Florida State above them last week, I don't see what Florida State did to deserve to get knocked down. Frankly, if we're going to think like that, Michigan and Ohio State shouldn't be ranked above Washington.
Well, yeah, we all know the committee's ludicrous. Like the consistency is just not there. But it has nothing to do with Florida State doing something or not doing something. I mean, they played North Alabama. They were going to roll either way. I think it has a lot to do with Washington. And you start looking at their resume and stacking it to Florida State and saying, yeah, Washington is taking care of business. And I think both of these teams, if they win out, they're both going to be in the college football playoffs and realistically have a good shot at playing each other in the first round, which would be an electric matchup. I think it had a lot less to do with State and the Jordan Travis injury and more with Michael Penix and the Washington Huskies going on the road in an ugly, hostile environment, cold and rainy, and taking care of business against a very good Oregon State team. At the end of the day, it's a Tuesday night in the fall. Winter actually, and you're going to get frustrated about the college football playoff rankings. I'm not necessarily frustrated with what the committee has in terms of the top 6. I actually think I agree with it, but I more wanted to address the idea that Florida State being left out as an undefeated conference champ just because they lost their quarterback, to me, is a complete injustice, a complete disservice. If the committee does decide to do that, and we'll get on in 3 weeks and start talking about this, you're gonna see me hot. You're gonna see hot under the collar. So we'll see what happens. Wanted to get ahead of it, talk a little bit about the rankings. Appreciate you guys rocking with the fellas. Again, if you do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.